that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 432nd edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and the amazing Tom Fennell.
I'm gonna demask myself.
You're going to demask. Okay, we have been told that it's okay since there's only two of us in the room and nobody ever comes in here except for doing the kind of thing we're doing, and nobody's been in here for a long time, that it's okay not to wear masks in this room. Every day I go to the internet, as probably every single person watching this show knows. I go to the internet and find the news about energy and climate change, and I put up
Well, this
posts.
goes into a blog.
Yes, to my blog, geoharvey.com. And if you want to read the articles that Tom and I are talking about, you can go there and click on the date. We are going to start on Thursday, August 12th, which is a week ago today.
Well, some of these articles are well worth looking at.
Yeah.
Some of them are tremendously informative.
Yeah, and
I'll
some
try
of them
to
are
remind
very
you
important.
of that, but if you got the time, some of these things are very, very well worth looking.
Right, and if you are watching this, which obviously you are, you wouldn't be hearing this. You're at YouTube or BCTV or
Good conclusion.
one of those things. The site that Tom and I use, which is not geoharvey.com, it's got only the information that we're talking about on it. That site has been posted as a document, the content of the site as a document, and also there's a link to the site, so you can look these things
There's
up
several different ways for.
There are different ways that you can get to this news.
You don't have to be terribly adventurous.
No, you don't have to be adventurous. You know, one of the things, I was playing games in the last two days because WordPress changed its, there was a change at one of the sites that I post to on the WordPress editor. Mm-hmm. And
They keep doing that.
they do, yeah.
All of a sudden, things you've been doing for years won't work.
Yeah. So, those things happen. But I kind of fight through them. By the way, I want to mention something, and that is, I wrote a novella, as you might know.
Yeah.
And I decided that I was going to expand that by one chapter, which led me to thinking, okay, I've got the novella, people have read it. How do I tell them that there's one more chapter? And as I started working on this new chapter, I realized it's more than one chapter. And it wound up being 14 chapters. And I wrote this in such a way that it could be a standalone novella, or it could be combined with the original novella to create a novel. And the novel, I finally finished the first draft of last week.
Congratulations.
So it's done. I'm working on proofing it. If anybody wants to read my crazy novel, it's going to be available to people who say, George, could I have your novel? I've given so many of those novellas away. It's crazy. Okay, we are going to start. Now, we are up to Thursday, August 12th, with a picture of a surveying article.
See if I can't get this picture.
Yeah,
up
you
there.
can do it. You know how. And we have an article here
A couple nice icebergs.
from
there.
Clean Technica. Yeah, well, that particular picture was, for whatever reason, if I can't use the article that comes with the post, the photo that comes with the post, I will find another one. And so this is the one I found, which is why it came from NOAA via Unsplash.
Well, that's a good picture.
It's a nice picture.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
Clean Technica.
certainly does show you Arctic ice.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's not the coast of Florida.
I don't think so. Okay, what do you got for a title for this article, Tom?
We have solutions to the climate crisis. Now we must act.
We have known for many decades that at some point the day would come when the climate crisis was not a distant, faint future occurrence, but happening now. The only remaining question is how fast will we take action to reduce the consequences of this planetary emergency?
Well, I got 3 sentences that apply to that I'm going to
Please
read
do.
here. Zero emissions technologies are not only cleaner,
Yep.
they perform better, create more jobs, last longer, and are less expensive.
Yeah.
Duh.
Duh.
The conclusion is unmistakable. We must utilize a broad spectrum of technologies and act without delay.
Yes.
And the final sentence says it all. We know what to do. Now is the time to find the courage to do it.
That's right. Yeah. Incidentally, the first 2 times I became aware of the fact that the climate was changing was when I was in 7th grade.
You're kidding. What was your clue?
Well, one of them was an article that appeared somewhere. I think it might have been National Geographic, but they said that the glaciers were retreating in Glacier Park, and they didn't know why. But they thought...
That's a long time ago.
Yeah. And the other one was, my teacher came, we were talking about weather and climate and stuff, and he said when he was a kid in northern Minnesota, I think it was, he said the old timers who lived in the area that he was in used to talk about how when they were younger, there was more snow and it was colder.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. Okay, we should probably...
Talk about Glacier Park. I have read an article recently saying in a few more years there ain't going to be any glaciers in Glacier Park.
Yeah, it's kind of distressing. Okay, our next issue is from Sustainability Times.
And let's see.
And there is the picture.
Okay.
Los Muertos.
That was what I was looking for.
This was not the picture that was with the article, but the picture with the article, which I didn't want to use because it had been stretched. And it was clear to me that it had been stretched. So I
Stretched?
But it was a picture also at Pexels of the Los Muertos crew.
Well, it says they're installing solar panels.
Yeah.
They're not. They're
Okay.
posing.
They're posing. All right. I will take your word for it. What do you have for a title for this, Tom?
Small businesses can play a big role in championing renewables. Well, yeah.
From a report from Total Retail reveals a noteworthy trend. Over 4/5 of Gen Z consumers, holy smokes, Gen Z consumers already?
I'll explain what that is in case some people don't know. But keep going.
You'd think that they would be, still in diapers or something.
Well, they're not.
Yeah, they're not. And 3/4 of millennials consider environmental sustainability in purchasing decisions. They value companies that put responsible and ethical practices into use.
Well, millennials are people born between 1981 and 1996.
It's like I said, I keep thinking of these people, they belong in diapers in my...
Gen Z, people born between the late 1990s and the early 2000s.
Yes.
So they're reaching maturity now.
Huh.
Okay.
Man, can you imagine
And they're the Gen Z is set to overtake the millennials in 2026.
Oh, man.
They provide a golden opportunity for enterprises to fulfill promises of sustainability while still maximizing profit margins.
I got news for you. This whole business of addressing climate change is the biggest business opportunity.
It could very well be.
Ever to present itself.
We'll
It's
be
just,
talking about that later on.
Okay. Our next item comes from CNN, and we have a picture here of methane.
And we got a
And
picture
the
of
increase
methane
of the amount of methane in the atmosphere in various places.
That graph is kind of confusing because they coincide with each other.
Yes, they do.
So that red graph goes all the way up underneath the green graph. If you look closely, you can see that.
Yes.
And the yellow graph goes all the way under the black graph.
Yes.
They coincide.
Yes. Okay, what do you got for a title?
Well, the picture is atmospheric methane, and the title is, Scientists Say This Invisible Gas Could Seal Our Fate on Climate Change.
Yep. Reducing carbon dioxide emissions is critical to ending the climate crisis, but for the first time, the UN climate change report emphasized the need to control a more insidious culprit, methane, an invisible, odorless gas 80 times as effective as carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas.
80 times.
80 times. That's
it
in
just
the
doesn't
short
last
range.
as long.
It doesn't last as long.
But,
And-
but we're still talking, what, 80 years or 100 years? or
No,
something?
I think it's 80 years for the first 20 years, 80 times for the first 20 years, and then if
And
you,
then it
if you stretch the
reduces.
period to 80 years or something like that, it comes
And
down to
carbon
20 times.
dioxide stays there for a lot longer.
Carbon dioxide stays until it's drawn down, which has historically been done by plants.
Yeah.
But this methane is the primary ingredient, constituent in natural gas.
Well, I was just going to say that. Methane is the main component of natural gas. And it's an agricultural byproduct.
Well, yes, that's because cows burp.
And it can also leak from oil and natural gas wells, pipelines, and processing equipment.
Yeah, and we've got
so there's a lot of ways it can get up
A lot of ways
there.
it can get there.
Scientists say methane emissions need to be reduced quickly due to methane's incredible warming power.
Yes. Okay, we're
Now,
up
if
to...
it's 80 times as effective as carbon dioxide, that's incredible.
On the other hand, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, if you want to think of it that way. Okay,
Yeah.
we're up to Friday, August
Friday the
13th.
13th. How about that?
And we have a Shell hydrogen
Got a
station.
picture. I've got a picture here.
Yes.
Of
And this is an article in Clean Technica.
theory versus reality. The dirty hydrogen story.
Yeah, not all hydrogen is clean, according to a report in the New York Times. A peer-reviewed study by researchers at Cornell and Stanford finds that most hydrogen used today is extracted from natural gas, actually about 95% of it, in a process that requires a lot of energy and emits vast amounts of carbon dioxide. So that's making hydrogen the old-fashioned way that they make it. And the green hydrogen that people talk about is made by electrolysis, which
But they have to use green electricity,
in order to have it green hydrogen, they have to use green electricity. That's right.
which they don't.
Well, they do in some places.
In some places. I mean,
Yeah.
some-
We could make lots of green hydrogen here in Vermont.
how would we
Almost
do
all
that?
of our electricity is.
Yeah, it comes from
is
hydro, doesn't it?
A lot of it comes from hydro. Some of it comes from solar, wind. But a lot of our.
Mostly comes from hydro.
Some of it comes
Hydro
from
Quebec.
those managed forest plantations in northern Vermont.
Well, that's almost all used by Burlington.
Yes, indeed, it is. Okay, should we go on?
Well, researchers say that the promise of blue hydrogen is a very costly lie.
Yeah, it's a very costly lie.
Producing blue hydrogen from natural gas releases methane.
Yeah. How
So where
about
the
that?
heck are you?
It also
Okay.
releases carbon dioxide. You're better off just burning the natural gas. Okay, our next item is from Renews,
Yeah, we
and
got a
there
nice-
is a little
nice
picture of
there.
Ireland.
I've been there.
Have you? That very spot.
Well, I don't know if I've been in that town.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah,
Kinsale.
that's Kinsale,
Kinsale.
and that's about 50 miles south of Cork City.
Okay.
And my both parents came from Cork City,
Okay.
and I visited Cork City with my parents.
Yes.
You know, we went and saw the high school my grandma went to and
Yes.
stuff like that. It was interesting. So we just went down to see Kinsale just because it's a pretty town.
Yeah.
It's on the coast.
You remind me of a person I knew once who was telling me about his grandmother, who came from Ireland and came to the United States and was naturalized. And when she went to wherever it was that she was getting sworn in as an American citizen, they asked her if she had been out of the country in the last 7 years. And she said yes. And they said, where did you go? And this woman who had been living for years and years and years in New York City said, New Jersey. Okay.
Well, a lot of people have said Brooklyn is a foreign country.
Yeah, well, it kind of is. This is from Renews. What do you have for a...
ESB unveils Irish green hydrogen product.
Yeah,
ESB is Electricity Supply Board. It's
okay. A large-scale green hydrogen storage project off the coast of Cork, Ireland, which doesn't have anything to do with corking bottles, was launched by ESB and DecarbonX. Green hydrogen at Kinsale is an integrated project that could store up to 3,000 gigawatt hours of green hydrogen and hydrogen carriers, the equivalent of about 10% of Irish annual electricity consumption.
Well, well, Kinsale and Cork really is about as far south in Ireland as you can get without getting your feet wet.
Yeah.
You know, it's down in the very far southwest,
Right.
southeast.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty part of Ireland.
This is where Dr. Kildare came from.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah.
Isn't that where Kildare is?
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the same area. Well, storage of green hydrogen is in recently decommissioned subsurface natural gas reservoirs at Kinsale.
Right.
They're there already.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're going to use them for storing hydrogen.
That's exactly what this article's about.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, our next item has a picture of Bill Gates associated with it, and it comes from CNN.
Well, let's get Bill Gates. So
Whenever I
everybody
see
knows
Bill
what he
Gates,
looks
I think
like.
of my old political economic
Now,
policy.
He's
which
the
was-
world's richest man, isn't
He
he?
might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. My old policy
Looks
was.
pretty smug in that picture.
Yeah,
there.
it was what I referred to as the blame Bill policy. This goes back a long time ago. If anything went wrong and it had to do with computers, doesn't matter what kind of computer, didn't matter what the operating system was, blame Bill Gates.
Blame Bill, huh?
And if it didn't have to do with computers, then at that time it was blame Bill Clinton. Anyway, this is from CNN, and you have not read the article.
Bill Gates pledges $1.5 billion to climate projects in the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, Bill Gates has pledged $1.5 billion over 3 years, so he's, it's kind of cheap. I'm only going to give you $500 million a year for climate change partnerships. I'll bet he doesn't stop here with the DOE, though through his climate investment fund, Breakthrough Energy.
Didn't he put a car into space?
No, that was Elon Musk.
That was Musk, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
The $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill has over $100 billion for addressing climate change. Ever since he married Melinda, who he's now separated, I think divorced from, he started taking interest in doing good things.
Charities.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on this?
Well, Breakthrough Energy hopes to fund climate-smart technologies. Breakthrough Energy is his company.
Yeah.
The ultimate goal is to reach a net zero carbon emission economy by 2050.
Yeah.
It's doable. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but it's doable. We got to do
one
it.
of the things that he's doing is he's investing money in nuclear technology.
That's not a good idea.
There was nuclear technology.
I mean, it's carbon free, but it's not clean.
It's not really carbon free even. There's a lot of transportation.
Well, when you consider what it takes to make it work,
Yeah.
the secondary stuff uses a lot of carbon.
Yeah, and on top of everything else, if nuclear energy costs twice as much as a solar and battery that would have the same amount of output.
And they still don't know what to do with the byproducts.
Yeah, and on top of it, just think about this, Tom. If you have solar plus battery and it's designed to have a 24/7 output, which you can do, except for once in a while you don't have quite enough input, so you've got to import some.
It's
But
doable.
It's doable. If you have it the same size in terms of the output, the power, as nuclear, it'll take a fifth of the time to build, and it'll cost half as much. It doesn't have any byproducts that are toxic. It has an energy supply that can be adjusted on the fly to meet demand, which you can't do with nuclear. You need to have other energy supplies.
You can't turn a nuclear plant on and off with a flip of a switch.
You can't move it up and down. But the solar plus battery,
really,
you can do
no.
that by the second or by the microsecond. And then the nuclear plant is not as reliable as solar, because it's got to be shut down every 18 months or 2 years.
Well, they cost so much to build these days. It's unlikely you're going to see more of them being built.
I think that's true. Okay, our next item is we have a picture of a water cycle. And this is from
Well,
Popular
let's
Science.
see if I can't get that picture up here.
Yeah, get rid of me.
I
There
think
you
I
go.
can get that picture. Ah, that looks like a water cycle to
It
me.
does, doesn't it?
And let's leave it up there for a little while for people to look at. And that is the key parts of the water cycle.
Key parts.
And what the article says is the planet's water cycle is changing rapidly. And then they explain, here's what it means for us.
Yep, a number of factors are intensifying the water cycle, but one of the most important is that warming temperatures raise the upper limit on the amount of moisture in the air.
Well, that's what's really happening.
Absolutely it is. That increases the potential for more rain. Oddly,
Ask the people from Houston.
yeah, it also increases the potential for drought.
Interesting.
And because of
One
that,
hand washes the other.
yeah, I guess it is. If you can put more water into the air, that means that if the air is blowing over the land, it can suck more water out of the land. It can make more water evaporate. If you can put more water into the air, then when that air comes up from the Gulf of Mexico or wherever, and it's got more water in it, and it
It's
hits
gonna come
cold
down.
air, it's just going to come down.
Yep.
And so that's both.
By the way, there's some good maps in this article.
Yeah, there are. And that we have a good map in the next article.
But let's see if there's anything I wanted to say about that.
Good idea.
Water-related hazards can be exceptionally destructive. Okay? And the article shows a couple of pictures of some floods.
I think I've told you that years ago when I lived in Plymouth, Massachusetts, there was a seawall that was it was breached by.
Yeah.
I think it was the perfect storm. It might have been Hurricane Bob, but I think it was the perfect storm. They were about 6 weeks apart. And that seawall had blocks of stone that were about, I'm going to say 6 feet long, about 18 inches, 20 inches high.
And they tossed them
and
around
about
like
2 feet.
kids' cookies.
They were washed out of the
Wow.
seawall, and they were 50, 60 feet away out in the sand on the beach.
Wow.
And the waves were hitting the seawall, and they had broken
Yeah.
little holes through where that had been perhaps mortared or something like that, and they had gone through under a road that ran right along the seawall. And I went down there and saw the waves crashing, and every time a wave hit, pieces of the road would fly 8 feet up in the air.
The sea can do a lot of damage.
Unbelievable. And that was this was light damage. This was on Plymouth Bay, which is behind Cape Cod. This is supposed to be fairly
It's protected. Should be protected, yeah.
spot. And,
Well, I'll repeat this thing. We've said it again. Reducing emissions will reduce impacts. Every fraction of a degree matters.
okay.
We're moving along.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Our next item,
Got a nice picture of the world here.
we have a
don't
picture of the world. It's a map, and the red areas are areas that were
Warmer.
up to 5 degrees Celsius warmer than usual. 5 degrees Celsius is 9 degrees.
There's even a couple of places where they're blue, like South Africa.
Yeah, there are a number of places where it's blue. Blue means below the normal temperature, but
Look at the western U.S. Look
Yeah.
at almost all of Europe.
yeah, the area along the east coast of China. Yeah, okay, and this is from CNN.
July was the hottest month on record. The hottest month on record.
Yeah,
Ever.
we just had the hottest month as a planet in any of our lifetimes. And we saw the weather extremes that came with it. The global temperatures in July 2021 were the highest for any July in 142 years of records, according to data released from NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information. Well,
This is a good article here. There's 30, if you like photos, there's 30 pictures in it and
Yeah.
a short video. So
Yeah.
This is a pretty good site.
Yes.
Well, CNN usually does a pretty good job. They have some pretty good sites.
yep. Okay, time to go on?
Well, each of the last 4 decades has been successively warmer than any decade that preceded it.
Climate change isn't happening. It's a Chinese hoax.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's like, okay. All right, our next item is the levelized cost of
Let's
electricity
get that picture up here so people can look at it.
as has been represented to us by the Fraunhofer Institute, which is in Germany. Now, Germany is right on the brink of shutting down the last of its nuclear power plants. So nuclear power is not considered here. If it were, the other LCOE records that I have seen would indicate that it would be higher priced than hard coal, and possibly not quite as high priced as gas turbines.
Well, it says renewables much cheaper than fossils.
Yes.
And for what it's worth, the levelized cost of electricity is the average cost per kilowatt hour over the expected life of the product.
Right. This is from Clean Technica. Fraunhofer ISE released a levelized cost of energy analysis for power plants in Germany, a place with solar resources comparable to Alaska's. This is not a joke. And I will point out, there is no square inch of Germany that isn't farther north than the northernmost point in Vermont.
Well, neither Germany nor Alaska has outstanding solar sources.
No, but look at this. The cheapest electricity there is utility scale PVs.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, if the solar source from Germany is going to be the cheapest, what would you say to India? Well, you know, or Saudi Arabia. It's not a surprise to me that you have bids coming in for power purchase agreements at 1.33 cents per kilowatt hour. This is compared to the 6.5
Well,
cents.
we've seen that number.
Yeah, compared to the 6.5 cents that Vermont Yankee said was an offer we could not refuse.
Well, if you look at that graph there, the gas turbines can cost you a heck of a lot.
Yeah, but you know, next to that is CCGT. That is combined cycle
different
gas.
kind of gas turbines.
Well, what they're doing with the CCGT is they're taking the exhaust from the gas turbines, which is very, very hot, and using
running it to, okay, so
and
it's kind of like free energy.
Yeah, sort of. And the result of that is that you can get 60% efficiency out of gas, which is much higher than
the
you
blue
would
gas
expect.
turbines are the emergency gas turbines that they turn on.
That's correct.
That's why they're so expensive.
Yep, that's right. Okay, we have an item now. We're still on Saturday. We have an item from Clean Technica.
We're moving up to Sunday, I think.
Oh, you're right. It's Sunday.
Okay, let's get this picture.
We're
up
on
there.
Sunday,
we got
August
the picture
15th.
up already.
And this is
It's a neat-looking little house, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the tilt.
It's collapsing.
It's collapsing. That's right. It's gradually falling. It was built on permafrost.
Built on permafrost, and the permafrost is melting.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is from Yahoo Finance.
How investors and everybody should think about climate change.
Companies that don't make a transition to deal with climate change risk falling behind or having their business models usurped. For example, consider the $5.8 trillion global insurance industry and the upheaval that climate change is creating there.
Well, they're much aware of the problem because they're the guys that have to pay for it.
That's right.
Well, with climate change, it's been hard to get doubters to believe. Evidence is dismissed as a little heat wave or ice melts or so what. Okay? It's now impossible to deny climate change. And it gives some examples. Fires all over the world, flooding in Germany, unprecedented heat waves, massive ice sheet shrinking.
You can have unprecedented heat waves, but when they come one right after another,
they're not unprecedented anymore.
7
out of California's 10 largest wildfires occurred within the past decade.
Yeah.
Something's happening, folks.
Something is happening, yes.
Well, insurance companies bet against these events and they're losing.
That's right. Okay, we are up to a new item in Clean Technica and a new slide.
And
this is the
pull this one up if
unsubsidized
I can.
levelized cost of storage comparison. This is like the levelized cost of electricity.
Levelized cost, but it's a different component.
Yeah, and in this particular case, I have to say this is possibly one of the most exciting articles I've ever read.
How is that?
Well, read the title for it, Tom.
Agora CO2-based redox battery wins the global DTEC competitions and has a 1-year return on investment.
Now,
That's not bad.
Aren't you excited about that? I did a lot of research on this. We're going to talk about it again. But let me read the synopsis, and then I'll tell you what I found. Agora Energy Technologies has a flow battery. We've talked about flow batteries.
I'll mention what it is again after.
Yeah, that is revolutionary and has won some well-deserved awards. It is based on the chemistry of carbon dioxide, none other than, and it
which is unique. This is their specialty.
Yeah, and it captures aggressively in an open loop system, which it captures aggressively in an open loop system, and renders into, by golly, commercially useful chemicals.
How about that?
How about that? Now, should I describe all of this?
Yeah.
Okay. You know about flow batteries where you have electrolytes and the electrolytes exchange.
Well, a flow battery uses tanks of chemicals separate from each other and from the parts that transform one type of chemical into another.
Right.
So the flow battery itself is small.
Yeah, but in this particular case...
But there are reservoirs.
Yeah.
And they could be the size of a lake.
Yeah, they could be as big as you want them. Okay. In this particular case, one of those two electrolytes is useful in a way which is kind of special, and that is that it is powered by carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Which is very interesting. That's what these guys are doing that's unique.
And it takes that carbon dioxide and makes it into carbonates.
Okay.
And those carbonates can be stored. We're going to see this again.
Limestone, oyster shells.
We're going to see this again in this show.
Okay.
You remember I had a photo or an image, and you sent me a message saying this image is used twice?
Yeah.
This is one of those two. So we will get back to this. But it captures the CO2 and it makes it into things like calcium carbonate.
That's what I just said,
things
limestone.
that are useful. I looked up the prices for these things, and I looked up the costs. This calcium
That's something
carbonate...
I've not done, and you pointed out it's very expensive.
The calcium carbonate that they are making is cheap, and it's also pure. Do that. Say pure. I almost missed on it. And so
in this particular case, it's cheap.
It's cheap, and they're able to not just capture the carbon dioxide, but they're able to sequester it in a commercially useful form, while
which they can sell.
This is all a byproduct.
Yeah.
It's all a byproduct of storing electricity. Now, go back to that slide.
If I can do that.
If you can do it. You see those things that look like, I don't know, they're little jaggies in the middle of the... That is the levelized cost of Agora Energy's battery technology. So it's the cheapest battery around.
So it's gone up and it's come back down.
No. Where that apex of that thing is, that's the price.
Okay.
All right? It's cheaper than everything.
So it's situated in the right place on that graph.
Yeah, it's the cheapest game in town.
So in the case of transmission and distribution.
Yeah.
Well, in each case, it's the cheapest.
It's the cheapest. And the batteries are very inexpensive, and they don't have toxic chemicals in them. I mean, this thing
It sounds like a win-win situation.
I think you have missed a couple of wins there. Okay, we will get back to it. All right. Actually, we'll get back to it very soon, because our next item is from the Huffington Post, and it talks about carbon capture.
And we got the same picture.
This is a picture that we will revisit in a different place.
And the picture is called Carbon Sequestration.
Yes.
And we'll leave it up there for a little while for the people to look at it and read it.
While we talk about it, why don't you read the title of the article?
That's the title of the picture.
Activists.
Activists call it a false solution, but UN scientists say we need to suck up CO2.
Now here's the problem. Well, let me read this first. Avoiding climate catastrophe at this point will require removing carbon from the atmosphere, because it's got too much there. The IPCC report makes clear that averting catastrophe now will require us to develop measurable, surefire ways to suck CO2 out of the air and return it to the ground. Now, what they're saying in this document is there is no way we're ever going to plant enough trees to get the
No, we can't
CO2
do
out
it.
of the air. We've gone too far. And every day that goes by before we start this stuff going, we have gone too far. Now, this particular graphic shows in a very
pull it
kind
up
of
again.
hidden way, if you look kind of off slightly to the left of center, you'll see a tiny little bit of smoke coming up, which is the dispersed CO2. And what they're trying to do is get the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere by planting trees, by doing this, that, and the other thing. And then,
all these are helpful, but they're far from sufficient.
yes, and then the other thing that you can do is you can capture the CO2 from the stack, and you can do various things with it. But the big
Before it gets into the air.
Yeah, but the big problem is carbon dioxide. What are you going to do with all we're
That's the
talking about
picture. That's
hundreds
the
of
question.
millions of tons of carbon dioxide. What are you going to do with it? So that's what this picture talks about. You pump it into depleted gas reserves. You push it under water in big tanks, big bags that just hold it there. If you put it under enough pressure, it'll liquefy.
Yeah.
And enough pressure
And
is
it's
not
not a
very
heck
much.
of a lot.
No, 6 atmospheres, as I recall. I might be wrong about
That
that.
sounds about right.
But it's not that much, and pushing it into coal beds and stuff like that. But the problem is, so you put it in a big bag, and some crab comes along and bites the bag, and now all of a sudden it doesn't come out that way because it's liquid, because it's under pressure. It comes out as a liquid.
Yeah.
And it gradually mixes with the water, and now the whole ocean is full of seltzer water.
I'm not sure that would be bad.
I'll tell you, it would be bad. Okay, the crab loses his shell. We should keep going. We will get back to this.
Well, if we can talk about it for a second here.
Go ahead.
Ideally, they'll capture the carbon from the CO2 and sell it.
Well, yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about in that next slide when we get back to this.
I'll be darned.
In the meantime, we're up to a Monday, August 16th, and we have a picture. Whoops, wrong way. We have a picture of a hurricane, and we
Looks
have
like
an
a
item.
hurricane, a hurricane to me.
Yep, we have an item from Insurance Journal.
How extreme weather makes everything harder, except climate risk analysis.
The IPCC report has a clarity that is sobering. What does this newfound certainty mean for investors trying to hedge against climate risks? In the first half of this year, insurance losses from catastrophes topped $42 billion, and they are growing.
This report highlights the connection between burning fossil fuels and floods, heat waves, and wildfires.
Right.
They're definitely connected.
Yes.
So you got to start thinking about that.
Yes.
Destructive extreme events such as heat, droughts, and cyclones are being worsened by man-made climate change.
Yep.
That's basically what this article is saying.
Okay. Here are a bunch of swallows on electric wires.
Look like boits to me.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, let's see if I can get
But they
that.
are swallows
there
on
we
the
go.
wires. They're birds
They
on the
are
wires.
swallows. Yes, you can tell by their forked tail.
Yeah, that's right. This is from Reuters.
UK government to review green retail electricity tariffs.
UK government is concerned that energy companies could be exaggerating how environmentally
They
friendly
wouldn't do
their
that.
products are. Wow,
They
what a
wouldn't do
nasty
that.
thing to do. And it said that it will review green retail electricity tariffs. The review will look into the current system's transparency, that's important, and whether the rules are fit for their purpose.
Well, what the article says is currently energy companies are able to market tariffs as green, even if some of the energy they supply comes from fossil fuels. It's okay, as long as this is offset by purchasing renewable energy certificates. This review will explore whether the system needs to be improved.
Yes.
What the article basically was hinting is these guys are cheating.
They're working within the rules, but the rules are faulty.
The rules allow them to exaggerate.
Yep. Okay, we have an item from RTE.
We certainly do.
I don't know much
We got
about
a pic-
RTE. We have a picture of a data center.
Well, RTE is the electric grid,
Okay, Irish Electric Grid.
the Irish electric grid.
Yes, okay. And you have a title for the article.
Concerns at increasing demands on electricity grid. And this, by the way, is a picture of a data center.
Yes.
And for what it's worth, when they closed Yankee, they were trying to figure out what they were going to do with the capability of the transmission lines to bring electricity into that area where it used to go out of the area.
Yeah.
And they were talking then about putting in some of these
center.
data centers. I don't know
Yes.
if they ever did or not.
I don't know, but the data centers.
They use a lot of electricity.
I've read about data centers that used as much electricity as the city of Buffalo.
Well, if you're a company like, say, Amazon,
Yeah.
you're going to need a data center to handle all of what it is that you do.
Probably one.
You're going to need a lot of data
bunch
centers.
of them, yeah. Okay, the Irish electricity grid faces increased prospects of blackouts this winter as emergency plans to import generators have stalled. According to a professor of energy engineering at University College Cork, one problem has been lack of maintenance for 2 natural gas plants due to COVID-19.
Who'd have thunk?
Well, you know, I mean, these things are more vulnerable than people imagine.
Well, basically, yes. I mean, who'd have thought that people are going to get sick and they're not going to come in and maintain these plants?
Yeah, or that they aren't going to want to have people come in and maintain them because they're afraid of people making each other sick. Okay, we're up to Tuesday, August 17th, and we have a picture of wind turbines and
Is
an
that
article.
what those things are?
I think they are, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is from The Hill.
Bipartisan support for clean energy appears to be growing. That's an interesting trend.
Yes, and it's kind of amazing, all things considered. Many observers on Capitol Hill were surprised that 19 Republican senators supported the bipartisan infrastructure package that overwhelmingly passed the Senate last week. After decades of climate change denial and opposition to clean energy, the GOP seems to be changing.
Well, a man in the street is reading the tea leaves and backing clean energy infrastructure.
Right.
Okay, before that they were ho-hum. Now they're starting to wake up and say, hey, you know, we got to look at this.
And
There is a growing recognition in both parties that clean energy technologies are the future.
yes, and here, our next item from CNN with a picture of Lake Mead in April, and it's lower now than it was then.
I've been to that exact spot.
Have you?
And I can assure you that that gray line that you see all around the reservoir was a much, much smaller.
Yeah, well, those towers in the middle of the picture.
That's the water intake, the
is-
water
the
outgo.
the water, yeah, and it's supposed to be, those things are supposed to be
The water's supposed to be almost up to the top.
almost, yeah. Okay, have a title for the article, please.
Yeah, the first ever water cuts declared for the Colorado River in historic drought.
Now-
and by the way, there's about 40 pictures of the West's historic drought. This is a good
Yes.
good article to look up.
Yes, the federal government has now declared a water shortage on the Colorado River for the first time ever, triggering mandatory water consumption cuts for states in the Southwest as climate change-fueled drought pushes the level of Lake Mead to unprecedented lows. If anybody thinks that this is something that, you know, the West has experienced, that happens every, once in a while. No, I'm sorry.
It's
This
never
is the
happened
first-
like this.
This is the first time it's ever happened. And I'll point out that that the Oroville Reservoir, Lake Oroville, in California is in the same position. The Sacramento River, your farmers are not allowed to take water out of it.
Yeah,
This is
did we
all
talk
new.
about that? Because I know I read about it.
Last week.
Well, Lake Mead, which they're showing us here, is the largest reservoir in the U.S.
Yes.
It's now 35% full.
Yes.
Okay, the lowest since the lake was filled in the 1930s.
Right.
Lake Powell, which is the second largest reservoir in the United States, is 32% full.
Yeah.
Okay, so these cuts are going to start January 1st, and additional cuts are expected if the lake continues to fall.
Yes. Okay, we've got an item from Renews, and we've got a picture of somebody swimming out in the ocean.
I looked.
That is not the lake.
No, that's a guy.
Lake Champlain
He's
monster.
standing on the bottom there, and he's looking at. I enlarged that so I could make sure that that's a guy, and he's facing the turbines.
Okay. This is from Renews. What do you have for title?
BOE, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, wraps up the South Fork environmental review. And for what it's worth, the South Fork of Long Island is also known as Montauk.
Yeah, put
Montauk
that picture
Point.
up, Tom. I don't think people had a chance really to look at it.
Well, there it is. There's the
Bureau
guy
of-
standing there.
Yep. Ocean Energy Management has completed its environmental review for the proposed South Fork wind project in waters off New York and Rhode Island. The project will deliver approximately 130 megawatts of power to South Fork of Long
Usually
Island.
you don't associate New York and Rhode Island.
They're pretty
but
close
Long
together.
Island sticks out so far to the east
Yes.
that it touches the Rhode Island border.
Yeah.
So they're really, this is really just barely into Rhode Island.
Okay, we're up to Wednesday, and we have that same picture back again, but this time it's also from Clean Technica. But let's talk about this. What do you have for a title for the article?
Higher carbon prices driving greater interest in carbon capture technology.
Now, this is an interesting kind of, it's not unique that this has happened, but it is an interesting position. Carbon capture is expensive, up to $120 a ton, and it doesn't work very well. It may be a decade or more before carbon capture is commercially viable. I don't think the person who wrote this had read the previous article that we had associated with
I
this
don't think
picture.
so, because they don't quite jive.
They don't quite jive. But as countries' prices on carbon put prices on carbon, it might be possible to make carbon capture commercially profitable. Well,
that's
we
what
were just
talking
we
about,
were
if you
just
can sell
talking
it.
about this. Yeah, you can sell it. I mean, here we've got the picture of the. Why don't you put that up again, Tom? The picture of the carbon capture situation where this is what they're talking about, and what we talked about in the previous one isn't on the picture. Now, the one we talked about, they were grabbing the carbon dioxide and they were using it in a chemical process that was storing electricity. They were using that carbon dioxide to manufacture some sort of carbonate, like calcium carbonate.
Which was expensive.
It's expensive, except in this process, where it becomes cheap.
Yeah.
And the process wasn't designed to make calcium carbonate.
That's a byproduct.
That's a byproduct. So you've got a really good byproduct for a product which is storing electricity that is very, very superior. How in the world could they go wrong with this? Well, you never can tell. Maybe they can figure out a way I don't know about, but here's the thing.
Well, it makes a lot more sense to sell the carbon than to bury it.
Oh, sure it does.
And the truth is, and this comes from the article, in order for the Earth to remain suitable for human habitation, we need to stop burning fossil fuels, period.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Full stop. We need to stop. And in fact, I write, in Green Energy Times, every once in a while, I'll write something in defense of using biofuels. Bill McKibben has said we shouldn't be using fires at all. And
Yeah,
I
he said
think,
that.
in
We
fact,
shouldn't
he's
burn
right.
anything.
But at the same time, we have to get from here to there. And if that includes burning some biofuels along the way, my attitude is just do it under proper circumstances and carefully, if that's what's required.
Well,
But
we've got to do something about the CO2 in the atmosphere. There are several proposals. We just got to choose which of them make the most sense.
yes, we do. And
And what makes the most sense for you and me doesn't necessarily make the most sense for the oil companies, and that's the
well,
that's
the
one of
oil
the problems.
companies are going to, and in fact, they have started converting. I mean, Ørsted has already completed the process, and the Norwegian company, I forgot, it's
Well,
not
Ørsted used to be called
Danish Oil and Natural Gas, and
yeah.
it has nothing to do with either of those anymore. And the Norwegian gas, big gas company, which I think is Statoil, they're doing the same thing. They're following in Ørsted's footsteps, and then
So
the
they're
other
getting out of the oil
they're
business.
getting out of the oil business, and there are other ones too.
And in case of Norway, that's a big part of their economy.
For Norway, they have an absolutely huge retirement fund that is going to cover everybody in the country. And that retirement fund was built by selling oil out of the North Sea.
Yeah.
You know, I remember a time when there was no such thing as oil in the North Sea. That
Well, it was
anybody
there,
knew
just
of.
nobody knew about it.
Nobody knew. And, you know, I do remember that very distinctly because I remember when it was discovered that there was oil there. And, you know, which was, I think, about 1960. I might be wrong about that date. But anyway.
Well, we got another picture coming up.
We
it's
do.
Kind of a weird-looking picture.
It's
here.
a weird-looking picture, and this is an idea that whose time has not come, I think.
I guess I'm using the wrong,
There you
using
go.
the wrong mouse.
There you go. Yeah. That is a target chamber exterior. Now, I want to point out that there are ladders.
What
in
is this thing?
All right, why don't we read the title of the article, and I'll read the synopsis. And then
Major nuclear fusion milestone reached as, quote, ignition is triggered in a lab.
Yeah. Okay. An experiment appears to have triggered ignition, that's in quotes, the one word, energy output greater than input.
Which is a big thing.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
For the first time you're making money.
No, they're not making money.
We're not making money yet, but you're not losing money.
They're making more energy than they're using. At the National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory in California, with extreme temperatures and pressures like those at the center of the sun.
Yeah,
Now,
they have to go to extreme measures. Here.
What they did was they spent billions of dollars on this apparatus that you've seen, and then they used it to power, what was it, 140 lasers?
I don't know.
162, it said in the article.
They had to do something like that.
Yeah, and they were using those lasers to heat and contain hydrogen in a pellet the size of a pea.
Well, they got to get this temperature up to the temperature of the sun.
Yeah. How do you do that?
You're not going to do it with matches.
No, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it with a kiln. I mean, we're talking about temperatures that would melt any substance we know about.
Yeah.
And that big thing there is all designed so that they could put energy into this hydrogen that was in a capsule the size of a pea, and more energy came out of that capsule than went in. Now, they've got other problems that they've got to figure out, like how do you build a reactor that you can keep fuel going into so you don't stop it, start it up, run it for half a second, and then stop it.
Stop it, start it again.
You know, I mean, that would be kind of ridiculous. But this is a project that they've been working on. Ultimately, you can go back to 1950 or thereabouts.
Well, what they talk about here as ignition is the process that amplifies the energy output from nuclear fusion.
Right.
And it could provide clean energy and answer some huge physics questions.
Provided that they've got the fuel. Now, I want to tell you, there's one thing about this that almost everybody gets wrong. And that is, people say, nuclear fusion. Well, the fuel for that is water. And we've got, for practical purposes, an infinite supply. Sorry.
Well, it's water, but it's not exactly water.
Not exactly water. There are 3 isotopes of hydrogen that are found in nature. One of them is what they call protium N-hydrogen, which is just...
That's regular
hydrogen.
Yeah.
It's got a proton, it's got no neutrons, and that's it.
Yeah.
Now, there is deuterium, do-2. Why do-2?
Got
because it's got
a proton and a neutron.
And a neutron, 2 of these things in the middle of the atom. Think about this for a second. This particular atom weighs twice as much as the first atom.
And the third atom is?
The third type is tritium, where you have 1
tritium?
proton.
Does that suggest 3?
3. You have 1 proton and 2 neutrons. And that one is radioactive. And it doesn't have a very long half-life, so it doesn't last very long in nature. So if you go looking for it and you're lucky, you'll find a trace, but you're not going to find enough.
By the way, there's a lot of it on the moon.
Yeah, well, there's also a lot of it in nuclear power plants. So if you need a lot of tritium, you can get it by running nuclear power plants to make it.
I'll be darned.
Oh, okay, here you go.
Who'd have thunk?
The fuel for this thing is deuterium and tritium.
Okay.
No N-hydrogen at all.
Yeah.
Deuterium oxide costs about $3,000 a quart. You can actually extract it from ordinary water. Tritium oxide, you cannot get from ordinary water. It's radioactive. You got to get it from a nuclear power plant. It's about $3 million a quart. This is not water
really
we're
expensive.
talking about, not water. And in fact, I remember reading an article.
Chemically, it's water, but it isn't water as we know it.
Yeah, I remember reading an article about rats. And somebody had the bright idea of feeding the rats very expensive water and gave them deuterium oxide, which is not radioactive. And you know, the chemistry is exactly the same as regular water, but the hydrogen weighs twice as much. What happened to the rats?
They got heavy.
They all died of thirst. They
really?
could not
Couldn't
use
drink
the
enough.
water. Couldn't drink enough. And so this is not the same. And I don't want anybody to be fooled about fusion power being the end all and be all of our energy problems, because it's unbelievably expensive just in terms of the research that we've done
Well,
so
it
far.
sounds cheap because it's hydrogen and heavy hydrogen.
It's just water.
Yeah, just water, heavy water.
Yeah, and in fact, if you think about the fuel,
How much did you say a quart?
the deuterium is like $3,000 a quart.
Yeah.
When I looked it up.
Yeah.
It was actually $3,500 a liter. But
The tritium.
you need a license to get it. But if you have the license, it's like $3 million a quart.
Order me up a couple of quarts. I'm thirsty.
Right. And this is not, but the thing is, we haven't even got the technology. We've been working on the technological problems for 70 years. And it's, as far as we can tell, we have no reason to believe that this isn't going to be unbelievably expensive. And the cost of wind power and solar power keeps going down.
Which was talked about on the show. And,
Yep.
and right now, in most parts of the United States, in most parts of the world, really, the cheapest way to get electricity is through solar.
That's right. Okay, we should go on to our last item. This is from
Is this the last item
Yahoo
already? Yeah,
Finance.
I've got.
And we have a picture of wind turbines.
This is well, China. Excuse me.
My cough is catching, obviously.
China has approved a renewable mega project for green hydrogen.
The Energy Administration of Inner Mongolia, I've always loved that name, Inner Mongolia.
Well, Inner Mongolia is part of China. It's not
Yeah,
part of Mongolia.
Yeah, I know.
It's an autonomous region in China.
Right. Mongolia consists of Outer Mongolia and Inner Mongolia.
And Outer Mongolia is its own country,
That's right.
which is still controlled by China.
Well, depends upon what year it is, I think, because sometimes it's controlled by Russia. I think.
I think you could be right, yeah.
It was originally. The Russians cut it
Gobbled it
off
up.
from China and controlled it for years.
Well, with the breakdown of the Soviet Union, things have changed.
Yeah, and with the rise of Vladimir Putin, we've got the United States turned into a nation divided against itself, and so what do we know? The Energy Administration of Inner Mongolia has approved a massive hydrogen project. It gave the go-ahead for a cluster of plants in the cities of Ordos and Batu that will use 1.85 gigawatts of solar power and 370 megawatts of wind power to produce 66,900 tons of green hydrogen per year.
That's enough hydrogen to displace 180 million gallons of gasoline in a year.
Right?
That's a lot.
One of the things about this is they keep trying this in Australia, and it
doesn't work.
Well, it could work beautifully in Australia, but Australia is not the only place in the world this could work. It could work anywhere the sun shines.
And they got a lot of sun in Australia.
They got all kinds of sunshine in Germany. We just saw. I wouldn't advocate doing this in Germany, although they are making green hydrogen in Germany. Anyway, we're up to the end of our program.
Well, the article
Tom.
says it would require nearly 500 megawatts of electrolyzers to do this, which is more than the entire global market in 2021. So they're talking about a big project here.
And they're talking about companies that are going to have big profits. Okay, we should probably put both of us up on the screen.
Well, you can't dance, so let's figure out how to do that.
Yeah, well, that's
Bingo,
something
I
you
think
could do. There you
if I
go.
do that, And then again, if this will let me, if I can do that,
There you go.
there is us.
I see the red light on the camera's on, so maybe it's been working.
I didn't even notice.
When
yeah.
we started the show, it was not
wasn't working.
Anyway, we will be back next week, I promise. If I break my promise, it's probably because I broke my leg. And Tom and I are waving goodbye. We always said that we did it when we had the show without us on it. Now you can see.
Now you can see us.
See for
You'll come back and see us now, you hear?
Right.